Hey guys, and welcome back to the Puro Wrestling Academy. I am your co-host, Ray Russell, bringing you all the goodness of Japanese professional wrestling history. But in order to do it, I got to give all the credit to the professor of Puro Wrestling himself. Let's bring him back onto the show. Welcome back, Mr. Dan Ginnetty.
Thanks very much, Ray. We made it to 1960. We're in the 60s, finally. It took us, 11, 12 episodes, but we made it all the way through the 1950s. And we're about to embark on a huge year for the Japanese wrestling in general and specifically the JWA. We've got lots of stuff to cover, and I know there's a bunch of highlights and major points you want to lay out before we get into this show.
Absolutely. The rockin' 60s have begun, guys. Welcome to 1960 in the world of Puro Wrestling, and we started back in the 1880s. And wow, like 80 years later, here we are, as this year is quite the year. We talked about this off air. We're going to actually be moving away from a lot of running down house show results and TV results and things like that, unless they're really pivotal and important. And we're going to be focusing more on the big stories because we've got a lot of them coming, especially on this episode. If you guys have ever heard of the name of Antonio Inoki or maybe Shohei Giant Baba, we're going to talk about them today. Also, lots of international big competition tours we'll be discussing throughout this program. Rikidozan and Nagasawa going to be traveling to Brazil in the month of March, where they will run into some future talents that will become big names in the future here of the world of Japanese wrestling. We'll also look at the push of one Toyonobori. And then from there, the second annual World League, Dan, is upon us.
Yep, the big risk that Rikidozan took in 1959. He put all of his eggs in that one basket, and it ended up bearing a fruit. If eggs can bear fruit, that's what happened to Rikidozan in 1959. He needed money, and he made it. The World League was a tremendous success, and he would continue it in 1960. And we're going to go through those results, and we're going to go through the performance of the World League from a financial point of view to get a better idea of where Rikidozan is sitting and where JWA is sitting from a financial standpoint.
Well, also on this episode, we'll be discussing Yoshinosato. He's going to be moving up a weight class to the junior heavyweight league. But what does that mean for the light heavyweight title? Stay tuned for that, guys. Plus, the mighty midgets are coming to town. I do believe the very first time the midgets, the little people, coming to Japan to wrestle. And a lot of people love when we drop the names of the gaijin, the foreign talent coming in yearly here in Japan. And this time around, this episode, we're going to be discussing the likes of King Curtis Iaukea, Tex McKenzie, Leo Namalini, Bob Orton Sr., the grandfather of Randy Orton, Sonny Myers, Dan Miller, Frank Valois, Hans Herman, and Hombre Montana is coming to Japan. Guys, you guys can head over right now, Dan, to tpublic.com/WrestleCopia and pick up your Hombre Montana t-shirt right now.
I knew you were going to mention Hombre Montana. I saw he had a match against Yoshinosato, too.
Yes, absolutely.
The guy moving up the ladder, and he's got a shot against the guy with a hat.
I can't wait. Hombre Montana coming to Japan here in 1960. If that isn't all. Also, Stan Lasowski, who worked as the kayfabe brother of Reggie, the Crusher Lasowski. He also worked as the kayfabe brother of Art Nielsen as Stan Nielsen over in the States. But he's Stan Lasowski here in 1960. He's coming to Japan. Lots of great gaijin talent headed over this year. I can't wait to get into all of it.
No, it's going to be a great time. This is a monumentally important year for the history of Japanese professional wrestling. And in order to cover this properly, I'm going to need all of you to get in your seats, get ready for this, because class is in session.
All right, let's do it.
All right, you had already mentioned international big competitions. One of Rikidozan's cost-cutting measures was to not spend any time, effort, or creativity on naming his tours for the year 1960. This one would run 8 cards from, it's weird, it looks like it just matches up with the bi-weekly TV.
Mm-hmm.
So give him this much credit. He goes, I am not running any house shows because financially it's just not worth it. We're just going to do the TV tapings because at least we get some bang for our buck. And don't forget, the networks are paying me to put on a show for them.
Yeah.
So why do a show if you don't have guaranteed money coming in?
And it's funny, too, when you look, Dan, talk about 8 cards bi-weekly, it's not how it's basically this entire tour are the TV programs. And he's doing that to save up money and build up for the big shows, which are coming right after that. The World League, I believe, follows this specific tour. So very wise booking here by Rikidozan.
No, it's smart to do, especially for a promotion that's in a little bit of trouble. He's being as efficient as possible by having the only cards being the one that are already financially supported. And I will say, going through them, and I won't give the results because the results are the results. You can find them in the insanely detailed show notes if you're a member of the Patreon.
Very good.
He's got a lot of sellouts. Even the very first show of the year on the 15th, 10,000 people sellout, 15,000, 7,000, a smaller venue, but still a sellout. He's got a good number of sellouts for this tour. So
would you liken Rikidozan at this point to the Hulk Hogan era, the Hulkamania era? Because I'm looking at the results, and the main events are Rikidozan against these guys that are pulled from armed force stations and things of that nature in the main events, drawing 10,000, 15,000 people. It's amazing.
Yeah, he's feeding himself, but he is being fed a steady supply of outsiders that they're bringing him in, and he's knocking them down. I picked them up and put them down. And it's working. Now, one of the things I'm noticing here is not that Rikidozan needs his ego puffed up at all, but coming out of this with all these sellouts and making money off this tour, no doubt about that. Imagine him saying, look, it doesn't matter who I wrestle. I'm going to make money and they're going to come see me. That's exactly what Rikidozan probably doesn't need, is another boost to his already enormous ego.
It's, it's kind of funny. I liken it to the story that's been told time and time again in regards to Hulk Hogan working the Genius at Saturday night's main event. And Vince McMahon basically saying Hogan's going to pop a rating. He's going to sell out a crowd no matter who he works. And they, oh yeah, really? Well, he could do it with he could do it with the Genius, pal. And Vince proved them right. And so it's like Rikidozan can work these guys who are, I apologize to their families, but literally nobody's in the pro wrestling world. The Jim Wrights and things of that nature, and he's still drawing sellout crowds, 10,000, 15,000 people. It's amazing. Doesn't matter who his opponent is, they're coming to see Rikidozan.
Yeah, and he's even doing it, give him this much credit, is he knows they're coming to see him, but he doesn't do a lot of singles matches. There's 6-man matches, so he's getting Kokichi Endo involved, he's getting Yoshinosato involved, so they can get a rub off of him.
Right.
He does fight Jim Wright single 3 times every time. No, he's got that's weird. He's got Michiaki Yoshimura against Bob Orton in one of the main events on the TV.
Well, we didn't mention Bob Orton, basically the only real name on this tour as far as Gaijin goes. Now, Jim Wright also was a pro wrestler from the States, who I think he got his start back in the 1930s. He had worked under a lot of mask gimmicks, mostly. Even Frankenstein. Yes, guys, there was a Frankenstein all the way back in the 30s and 40s in pro wrestling. So there's that too. But yeah, so Jim Wright was actually a pro wrestler. So that's probably why Rikidozan's in there with him more often than not. The guy knows how to take a bump and work, especially under a hood as often as he wrestled. I'm thinking that the guy knew how to sell, right? He knew how to take the bumps. So I'm thinking that's why Rikidozan booked himself in those matches particularly. Very interesting.
Yeah, and we had already mentioned a good number of the outsiders, of which for this tour, they're listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I think 6 of them are from American headquarters, basically the nearby military base. So as far as outlay of cash to bring in outsiders, it's not costing him much to run this tour. And we already know he doesn't pay the boys, his own guys. So he's just making money hand over fist for this tour based on the results and the tickets sold. So this turns out to be a very good tour for him, and it only lasts to the beginning or the middle of March, but he's not there for the end of the tour. Before the tour even ends, and I noticed this because the last couple of TV episodes don't even have Rikidozan on it, he's already in a tour of Brazil, and he's fighting luminaries such as Indimi Baracchio, Caruso, Bunani, Mario De Souza, and Constantino Costorius, or otherwise known as Johnny Costas, who I believe he's wrestled before, no?
Yeah, Johnny Costas, he's worked when he's went to Brazil before. Also Mario De Souza. Those are actually names I'm familiar with. The rest, not so much, especially Caruso, but he must have been pretty popular in Brazil when he can wrestle with one name, right? I am Caruso.
Yeah. Like the artist formerly known as Prince.
One thing Well, true. One thing in common from all of those matches, there's the same guy goes over every time.
Correct. Yep, Rikidozan's there, and I think it's just his popularity has increased, and this looks like another opportunity for him to line his pockets and go on tour without the rest of the guys.
Right. Let's take a look at that just for a second, Dan. I mean, here's a guy in Japan. It's not like Brazil is right next to Japan. You know, I'm no geography major, but I'm pretty sure Brazil's pretty far away from the country of Japan. And yet he's coming there. He's the foreign talent now. And instead of putting over their local talent, they're actually putting Rikidozan over every single night. He doesn't even job on the way out to the big name, which is Johnny Costas, Mario de Souza. Those are the top two names. He's scoring. So unless they're planning something for down the road, very interesting that Rikidozan is being treated, as you said, bigger than just a Japanese wrestler, but just a international superstar. Yeah,
it's almost like a rock star going on tour. They're not putting anybody over. Right. Everyone's just happy to see the big guy. And I should correct myself. It wasn't just Rikidozan. He also took Nagasawa, who is of the top 5 guys. He's the 5th guy, but they're bringing him up. And there'll be a reason why I think Rikidozan is kind of bringing this guy along and taking him outside of Japan so he can actually get paid. And you're going to find out that a little bit later as we get farther on in the year. But Ray, there's something else that happens when he's in Brazil.
Oh, yeah?
And I think, oh, yeah. It's super important. It is a landmark event. It is the seed from which the mightiest tree will grow in regards to Japanese professional wrestling. While Rikidozan and Nagasawa were in Brazil for 4 weeks, in Sao Paulo, he met Kanji Inoki, a 17-year-old Japanese boy who had won championships in discus, shot put, and the javelin throw.
Wow.
And Rikidozan brought him back to Japan as a student. He told the young boy to pretend to be unable to speak Japanese because he had a plan to make him a crowd puller in his future Brazil tour. Interesting. So maybe this was a setup for a future Brazil tour based on what Rikidozan is saying.
Right, yeah.
So we're talking about Kanji Inoki, which would later become Antonio Inoki.
For those who couldn't figure that out.
Yeah, if you didn't already realize it, this is where it all starts. And since it's starting, why not start at the beginning? We're going to give you a little bit of background on Antonio Inoki. You probably know a bunch about him already. You may not know this stuff. This is details that come right out of his autobiography and on some of the many books that were written about Antonio Inoki, about his upbringing and how he ended up in Brazil. We're just going to take some time to run through this because it's important to set the stage for someone who is as important to the Japanese professional wrestling as Antonio Inoki.
We'll come back and we'll revisit this later on down the road too and kind of break down more about Inoki's career and Inoki's specials here as part of the podcast. But right now we're going to get the groundwork, everything that went on to bring Inoki into the world of pro wrestling.
Yep, so we'll start at the very beginning. Kanji Inoki was born in Yokohama. He was born in Japan on February 20th, 1943. And when he was 5 years old, his father, who was a rich coal dealer, died, and the fortunes of his family declined as oil began to replace coal. So not only did the father pass away, the family business started to become less lucrative. And as the coal business was disappearing and the oil business was taking its place, they need to get away from that poverty of just having the failing business. So his grandfather decided to emigrate to Sao Paulo with the entire family in 1957. But this isn't something, they didn't have teleporters back then, not like we have now. And they didn't have airplanes that they were going to fly on because that's way too expensive. So he ended up taking a boat. How else are you going to get there? And Inoki's grandfather died during the journey. And when the remaining members of his family got there, they led a hard life because at first, all they could do is work on a coffee plantation. It being Brazil, that was manual labor and working the fields. That's how you earned money.
And you're talking about like the 1950s Amazon too, right? Like that's not the easiest.
Yeah, this is the Amazon. This is where like the 80-foot pythons and all the mysterious creatures might even be. So it's hard work and it's scary work. And even after long hours of hard labor, Kanji Inoki worked out by lamplight every night. And when Rikidozan visited Brazil, Kanji Inoki was working at a fruit and vegetable market. Now, in Inoki's autobiography, he gave a detailed account of how he met Rikidozan for the first time. He was in a national track and field meet in Sao Paulo, and there was a journalist who reported that Inoki became a record holder in the discus throw on that particular meet. And he told Rikidozan that he knew of a promising big athlete. So I wonder who this journalist is. We should be giving him more credit.
Right.
Rikidozan was interested in that and asked to see the head of the vegetable market to bring Inoki to the hotel where Rikidozan was staying. And when Inoki entered his room, he didn't know what to say to the imposing figure of Rikidozan. Rikidozan just said, "Strip yourself to the waist." And after staring at him for a while, he said, "Show me your back." And Inoki turned around nervously. And Rikidozan patted him on the shoulder and said, "Let's go back to Japan together."
Oh, it's very Vince McMahon-ish. Let me see what you look like, pal. Get naked.
It is. At least he didn't make him try to throw up on command.
You've got a puke.
It's better than that guy.
Right.
So Rikidozan talked to the employer at the vegetable market and said, "Let me take care of this young boy." And Inoki's mom was against the plan, but Inoki's older brother encouraged him to try it. That's how it happened. Inoki and what remaining family he had left were laboring in the fields and working in a vegetable market. But in spite of all that, Inoki was an athlete, a very good athlete, and he kept working out. He was dedicated and worked very hard. And that journalist, whoever he was, who pointed him out to Rikidozan, is he should be getting some of the credit for what would come later. And in the end, Inoki is heading back to Japan after 3 whole years of being in Brazil. So he didn't spend that much time in Brazil. But it sounds like Rikidozan's already got an angle for him, a gimmick for him, a personality. He's already got something set up for him in order to properly market him. When Rikidozan returned to Japan with Kanji Inoki, another big man with good prospects came to see him.
Very big man.
So this is the yin to the yang for Japanese professional
Amazing
wrestling.
that it happened like this, too. It's insane.
You would, if you proposed this as the plot of a film, you wouldn't get any money for it. They'd say, "This is too unbelievable. It's too hokey. No one would buy this story." It's like, well, I'm sorry. It just actually happened this way. The other part of it, Giant Baba. Shohei Giant Baba, he was born in Sanjo City in Nagata Prefecture on January 23rd, 1938. So he's a couple years older than Inoki, about 5 actually. His father was a vegetable dealer. So now they're both working in vegetable stands. Interesting where Rikidozan recruits. And when Baba was 10, he was already as tall as his father. His parents put him to work transporting vegetables by bicycle-drawn cart into the markets for the morning. And he used a sled in the winter because he lived in an area that had heavy snow in the winter. By the age of 14, Baba's feet had grown so large he couldn't find shoes big enough to fit in the small town he grew up in. And one day when he delivered vegetables to a Mormon priest, you got to watch out for those Mormon priests, he noticed the worn sandals he wore and gave him his big shoes to him. They were a perfect fit for Shohei. I want to know, this is so very strange, a Mormon priest with abnormally large feet.
I was going to say, a large Mormon? I mean, was this Don Leo Jonathan?
You beat me to the punch on that. That's the secret to the story. So he traded his big shoes for Baba so Baba could actually have real shoes. And Baba was so deeply moved by that kindness that he converted to Mormonism. And I don't even think I'm joking about that. That's what the book said.
Wow, I never knew that. I don't know if he remains that way, but I never knew that. And then again, I didn't do a lot of digging into Inoki's background either. I didn't realize everything that he had his hands in going into pro wrestling as far as being an athlete. So very impressed by Inoki's background and very intrigued by Baba's.
Yeah, very strange, this vegetable market continuum. And then so on one side you have the random journalist that points the kid out to Rikidozan. And on the other one, you have a Mormon priest who gives Baba shoes. And that's what starts the whole thing. It's very strange. So in those days when Baba was young, his dream was to be a professional baseball player. Baseball's awesome. If you don't think so, well, eventually you will. And baseball was so popular in the States. It was also popular in Japan. And it was not uncommon for Japanese kids to want to be a famous baseball player. And Baba wanted to be one. And as you might imagine, based on his size and his height, being a pitcher is kind of a natural fit for him because of the amount of torque he could probably get on a pitch. And he was actually an ace pitcher. And during his junior year of high school, he was scouted by the Tokyo Yomiuri Giants, which is, there's multiple levels of leagues in Japan, but the Yomiuri Giants is a high level league. That's like Major League Baseball.
Right.
And they offered him a spot on one of the Giants' farm teams. He accepted and dropped out of school at the age of 16. Now, that alone is interesting enough, but there's a little bump in the road for Baba. And at the same time, he was undergoing a risky operation to remove a brain tumor. That I didn't know. I discovered that during the research, that Baba was already having health issues even as young as 16. But he recovered and he did join the team for which he was recruited. He did well and went from the farm team to the first team. But after 3 games, he was sent back to the minors. Now, without having the actual baseball stats, we know that towards the end of the season, you have your September call-ups, we call them, where you have developmental players. And for a lot of teams, it's like, all right, well, the season's pretty much over. Let's bring up some of these prospects and see what they look like on a major league field.
Right.
And it could have been something like that, or maybe just, they might have been in the middle of a playoff race. So they brought him up to see what he could do, and maybe they didn't think he was ready yet. But either way, he was up for 3 games, went back down to the minors, and then the Giants, the Yomiuri Giants, cut Baba from the team. But it wasn't for long. He wasn't out of work for long because he got picked up by the Tayo Whales for the 1960 season.
So that's where he's at as he runs into Rikidozan, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Rikidozan is coming back from Brazil now, and at the same time that he's doing everything with Inoki in Brazil, this guy Baba, who tried really hard to be a baseball player, is now finding himself bumped out of the majors, bumped off the Giants roster, and working with the Tayo Whales, which is a lesser team. And he knew where their training camp was because the Tokyo Giants also had their spring training camp there. He had a tryout, and he was assured of employment. He did well on his tryout. But his destiny took another turn, and this time for the worst. He slipped and fell on the bathroom floor tiles and broke and cut a tendon in his left elbow.
Oh, my God.
That is very unlucky,
that
ended his baseball dreams. It's almost too hard to believe. It seems strange to me, but
it's almost like he was destined to do something else.
That is correct. But that's just so strange, is that they would have something like that happen. Now, Baba's got an autobiography as well, autobiography meaning written by him, and he said that one of the sponsors of the Tokyo Giants lived in Akashi, again, where their spring training was. He invited me to his home every spring, and he got to know his daughter, Motoko. After the accident with his elbow, she often came to visit him in the hospital, and in 1966, they got engaged. So that's a pretty big jump in time because
I wonder how old Johnny Ace was in 1966.
Gross. The best thing about Johnny Ace is his brothers.
Well,
actually, really, only one of his brothers.
Hey, don't pick on me.
So Baba was very secretive in regards to his family life, and no one even knew that he was married until 1982. But we're jumping ahead into the world of Baba.
Right.
Aspiring baseball pitcher, tragic injury, and now we know that he is recovering from that elbow injury.
Right.
He finally gets out of the hospital. His father, his mother, and sister asked him to join the family business as a vegetable dealer because Baba's father had died several years before, but his pride simply would not allow him to return home. He couldn't do it because he thought it would be a failure. And somebody, again, maybe it's the same
Who are these somebodies? Same journalist guy, that was in Brazil.
Strange forces at work here. Somebody pointed Baba in the direction of Rikidozan. And Baba visited Rikidozan's gym in April of 1960, which is right after Rikidozan gets back, and talked to him about being a pro wrestler. Rikidozan told him to join the other students and he would make a decision. They did some training, and Baba did 50 Hindu squats, which isn't particularly impressive, but he did it.
At that size, it might be.
That's true.
That's a deeper bend and a deeper rise, that's for sure.
He's definitely doing a lot more work than guys with stubby legs.
Yes.
A lot of people don't consider the amount of actual work you do when you have long arms and long legs.
Right.
Doing the same workout as a shorter guy. So they did 50, ordered him to do another 50. When Baba did that, Rikidozan invited him to join. When Baba asked Rikidozan how much he'd be paid every month, he was offered the same amount of money that he made with the Tokyo Giants.
Wow.
So I based on Rikidozan talking to him openly about money, I think Rikidozan saw this monstrous guy and said, you know what? I'm not going to miss my second chance because I never did anything with the last guy who was 6'8", but I'm not going to miss my chance with this Baba character. So in his later years, Yoshinosato would say that at the time he felt Rikidozan needed younger and more manageable boys than Toyonobori or me because they were more adult and a little more hard-headed and you weren't able to push them around quite as easily.
Right.
So bringing in young boys that would just do whatever they're told is a benefit to Rikidozan. And Yoshinosato said he tried to recruit new big members.
Yeah,
and
I see Matty Suzuki's on that list. That's interesting.
Correct. Yeah. And that was what I was just going to say is that Yuki Mammoth Suzuki was more likely to succeed than Baba and Inoki. That's what Yoshinosato thought at first. But Mammoth Suzuki refused to accompany Rikidozan on his second tour of Brazil. He claimed to be suffering from lower back pain and went to the hospital, but some think that he just didn't want to go because he didn't want to be trapped on a tour with Rikidozan being as grumpy as Rikidozan is.
Right.
It's like, says, nah, I'm a dip. I'm not interested. But there was a difference between Baba and Inoki, even though they were, coming up in the promotion and they were going to be featured as like star pupils.
Right.
They were all experienced in sumo and judo. They all played sports as youngsters, and they both worked and helped their families by selling vegetables. So there's that vegetable connection between Baba and Inoki.
Again, vague. Which vegetables? That's what I want to know. That's the real deal.
They don't specify. We might have to get. I have more research to do. This is a living document. This job will never be done. I'm always going to keep digging. But Baba did differ from Inoki in one other respect. He had Rikidozan's respect due to the time he spent with the Tokyo Giants. So Rikidozan wasn't as hard on him as he was with the other students. On several occasions, Rikidozan told those close to him that he wanted to push Baba as his successor. On the other hand, by contrast, both Kojima and Inoki had a very hard time, and we'll get to that later. There's stuff that comes up in 1963, which is kind of weird regarding Rikidozan and how he treats Inoki.
Okay.
But I feel like we've established where Inoki came from and where Baba came from and how they just by luck, by one random dude that recommended Baba see Rikidozan, and then the random journalist in Brazil that pointed out Inoki to Rikidozan.
Yeah, was this random guy? I mean, there's supposed to be two different people, obviously, but I wonder if there's like just a dark cloak over this figure. Hey, Rikidozan, I got some news for you. It's so weird to look at that and see that he finds Inoki, a Japanese person, in Brazil. That's not really odd, but what's odd is he brings him back to his native land to go become a superstar in wrestling. But just like 2-3 weeks later, he runs into the giant Baba for the first time. It's insane that all of this happens with like in a 1 month span.
And I'm trying to picture myself in the mind of Rikidozan, which is a crazy person. And to see him luck into Baba and Inoki as young boys and the success of the recent tour and the success of the very first tour of the year with just TV tapings and he made money, he must have thought he was on top of the world because that's how Rikidozan always thought. And it's just funny that things are falling into place in spite of the way he's doing it. He just lucks into things sometimes, I guess.
Wow.
So
you can't get any much more lucky than that.
Yep. So now we've got Rikidozan back, Inoki is back, and Inoki and Baba are now in the JWA. Now they've got training to do. They're not going to debut quite yet, but he's got them in the dojo working out and prepping them for their new jobs as pro wrestlers.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
And that gets us into, well, the very beginning of April was a TV taping, but it's non-consequential. It's the same guys we'd already been talking about. What we really want to talk about in April is the second annual World League. Now, the second annual World League, you knew there was going to be a second one because the first one was the big risk, but it ended up paying dividends for Rikidozan and the JWA. It made a ton of money, lots of sellouts. The 14-card tournament was a huge success. It was exactly what Rikidozan needed to keep his promotion afloat. So he dodged that bullet, and he had the successful World League. Of course he's going to do one the next year, but this one's a little different. He goes from 14 cards to 23 cards. So that's a 60% increase in the total number of cards. So he's seeing every show as an opportunity to make more revenue. This is probably going to get him a couple more TV tapings, and it's going to get him a lot more opportunities to sell 10,000 tickets, 15,000 tickets. So now he's trying to expand the thing that saved his bacon last year and made him a ton of money. He's going to try to make even more money in 1960.
Yeah, it's insane looking at the card. And not only did they jump up in the number of cards, but they've also brought in even more foreign talent that, well, mostly from the North America, Canada, and specifically the United States this time around.
Yep, and you had brought up some of these names: Leo Nomalini, Sonny Myers, Hombre Montana, Luke Kim. I'm not familiar with, but Dan Miller, Stan Lazowski. You made reference to Frank Valois, Bob Orton Sr., the grandfather of Randy Orton, the father of Bob Orton, the guy with the not a wrist brace. What do you have? A forearm
cast. He had a freaking
cast.
Full on cast, man.
I wonder if he and Iron Mike Sharp ever fought. They could have like a cast match.
That would have been great. Well, probably not, but yeah.
Another excellent athlete, Bob Orton Jr. was, talk about a natural. He was a prodigy. Not to go totally off the rails, but I don't know if you've seen, thank God for YouTube, there's a video footage of him and a very young Dick Slater training in 1974, 1975, and you look at them in the ring and it's like, how do they get it this early, this young?
Yeah.
They're naturals. And it's just, I really like Bob Orton. Wasn't great on the mic, but certainly great in the ring. We move on to Hans Herman, and the Great Togo rounds out the, 9? Do we have 10 guys? I think we have 10 people involved.
10 foreigners.
With the World League, 10 outsiders.
Could have saved his money. All you needed was Hombre Montana.
If you had Hombre Montana and Jimmy Glarg, I think you'd make just as much money as these 10, whoever they are.
Absolutely.
So we're
Again, head over to tpublic.com/WrestleCopia. Get your Hombre Montana shirt today.
I don't think we'll go through the entire tour. And with 10 outsiders, that's going to be a lot of total matches.
It looks like, I remember last year, some nights there were 2 matches part of the World League, but it was typically 3 World League matches, and then they would do some sort of main event tag match. And here it looks like they've upped their game, because it looks like we have 14 people competing in the World League, 10 outsiders, and then 4 local talent. Rikidozan, Kokichi Endo, Toyonobori, and Yoshimura look like the 4 local Japanese talents involved in the tour, or the tournament, I should say, the World League tournament. And it looks like they're doing 5 matches, at least early on all the cards, 5 matches part of the World League tournament, the round robin stuff. So, and then they're still concluding the night with the tag team matches at the end with the guys that aren't wrestling in the World League matches for the night. So it's quite the stacked nights of action, I'll tell you that. It looks like about 10 matches each night.
Yeah, you're definitely going to get your money's worth if you were able to go to these shows. And these shows are reminiscent to me of All Japan's Real World Tag League shows, where they had so many tag league matches during every show, or even their Champion Carnival, so many tournament matches every show. Mm-hmm. But then not everybody in the tournament was competing in a tournament match every night. So the people that weren't in tournament matches, you just jammed them together and you had another excellent 6-man tag to end the show with. And these shows start off strong and they make a lot of money. I don't have results for all of them as far as house show results, but I do have confirmations of sellouts in Tokyo's Metropolitan Gym, which is usually between 12 to 15,000, sometimes higher. It's hard to get real numbers, but they would consistently sell out Tokyo Metropolitan Gym. They would draw 7,000 people in Shizuoka Motoshiro Pool. Kaneyama Gym, 12,000. Osaka Prefectural Gym, 12,000. This is huge numbers for the second World League tournament. And again, you're looking at 10 matches per show. This was a major deal, and it went all over Japan, and they were making money everywhere they went. Hiroshima, 25,000 at the Municipal Nikko Pool.
Wow.
25,000.
That's one of the bigger numbers for sure of all time at this point, really.
Agreed. It's hard to beat that for a total attendance. You have to have the right venue. And TV would reflect a little bit. They wouldn't go too crazy with Rikidozan matches, but these house show attendances are great. A commercial high school ground, which probably means outside, maybe in their sports field, 20,000 or 30,000. And that's in Tamashima, Okayama. Ridiculous house show attendances. These guys are making money hand over fist. He needs more money this time because he's got more outsiders, but some of these attendances are absolutely unbelievable. And it would end in, May 13th?
Right, the
final. And we go to the final of the World League. This might shock you, but Rikidozan's in it. And this probably won't shock you, is that the outsider that he faces is Leo Nomalini, who he's wrestled many times in the past.
And the most credible name on this entire tour alongside Rikidozan, Leo Namalini. So makes sense these two are in the finals together now. I'm a little upset they ousted Hombre Montana a little earlier in the tournament, but that's okay. Leo Namalini, totally credible as the finalist here with Rikidozan.
Agreed there, but they do give Hombre Montana the first televised match on that TV episode that did have the final. So you do get to see Hombre Montana on TV and Sonny Myers. And, of course, Rikidozan defeating Leo Namalini in 3 falls. They trade pins, and the last fall is a count out of ring that gets Rikidozan the World League Championship for 1960.
Total time of the match, all 3 falls, about 16 minutes in and out.
16 minutes is plenty because they have another 10 matches on the show. These have to be long shows. So 16 minutes is plenty for these guys. I'm sure the fans left happy.
Oh, absolutely. Their guy won.
So exactly, Rikidozan won. He's their Hulk Hogan. He's their everything. He's their Babe Ruth in regards to Japanese pro wrestling. He is the all and only thing that they are apparently coming to see. So with the conclusion of this World League tournament, I looked at the house show attendances of the prior year's World League tournament from 1959, and there was actually an improvement in average attendance of a couple hundred per show. So it's showing that this concept is sticking, it's popular, and it's going to make them more money. And the fact that he ran 60% more house shows, more shows in the tournament for the second year, means that he's really looking good financially, certainly compared to 1959 before the World League when he was in real tough shape. So you would think based on all of this, he would be rolling in dough.
You would think.
And that isn't going to work out quite the way he thought, because he's got a problem with one of his guys. And as far as I'm concerned, it's really his new number 2 guy. Kokichi Endo is kind of the guy that's always around and you're not sure why. But Toyonobori was the one that got the strong push.
Right.
And it's around this time that Rikidozan began to groom him and push him to the absolute top. But Toyonobori did some things that annoyed Rikidozan. So he had to back off on Toyonobori's push. Toyonobori had a bad gambling habit from even before he became a wrestler, and he was heavily in debt to the point where he occasionally missed bookings because he got tipped off that debt collectors were going to come looking for him at the show. And these guys would show up often uninvited, which made Rikidozan very angry. He was not a fan of these. And Rikidozan knows what it's like to run away from debt collectors. He left the country. He left the country to do it. Anyway, so Rikidozan accepted Toyonobori's apology and never took action against him. I mean, how could he? He's kind of in the same boat as Rikidozan, so maybe he kind of saw him as a younger him. And Rikidozan did appreciate the fact that Toyonobori had been faithful to him and knew that he would never betray him. But this was a problem because this was supposed to be his new up-and-comer, and he's got baggage, and he's got stuff that Rikidozan's got to deal with.
It's kind of like, we're going to go back and liken it to the Ultimate Warrior, right? The guy's kind of groomed as a main eventer now. He's Rikidozan's tag team partner more often than not in the recent months. And so you got yourself a main event star here that you've created, and now the guy's causing some issues behind the scenes.
Nothing can be easy. He says, this is going to be great. I'm going to push this guy. And then it just gets harder and harder with all this outside crap. And it's got to be frustrating for Rikidozan, who's just trying to keep this promotion running. And his, heir apparent has baggage that's going to make things difficult for him on a regular basis. So Rikidozan's coming to terms with that. But he did really enjoy Toyonobori and thought that he was going to be the next big thing because he had exceptional physical strength. As far as a worker, he wasn't Rikidozan. Rikidozan did a lot of training, and Rikidozan was kind of a visionary, and he got trained by the best of the best in regards to their working abilities. Toyonobori was a little more boring. He was a little more monotonous, not quite as inventive as Rikidozan, which, that's not a crime. It's not a felony. He's just, hey, that wrestler that's not as good as Rikidozan?
Yeah, that guy.
Is that the worst thing in the world? So Lou Thez was asked about Toyonobori, and Lou said, physical strength-wise, Toyonobori and Hans Schnabel were two of the most powerful wrestlers he ever wrestled. Two of the strongest by far. If you haven't seen a picture of Toyonobori, you need to check this guy out. Look on YouTube. There are matches with Toyonobori. This guy he's not jacked.
No.
He is a tank. He is a fire plug.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine how strong that dude is. And it's unfortunate that he couldn't be a better worker, but who cares? When you look like that, you can make money.
He was a mobile brick wall, basically.
Yeah, and that's great. Every promotion needs one. We can get into booking theory later,
sure.
But I always feel like every promotion you can cast almost like a sitcom. You need a big guy. Sometimes you need the big, strong guy who plays the role of the big, strong guy. Certain roles need to be filled because it's a formula that works and has worked for time immemorial. And Toyonobori has a role. He is out of central casting for the big, strong guy. So you can make money with that guy.
So, yeah, and you guys just have to bear in mind that, this is the next man up as far as Rikidozan's concerned. Again, we've seen it. We haven't really been going through the results here, but we talked about it in 1959 as well. Toyonobori returned, and he had been headlining quite a bit for Rikidozan when Dozan wasn't wrestling, or teaming with Rikidozan off and on, even here in 1960, quite a bit up until this point. But again, there's issues going on behind the scenes, and that we'll have to just kind of pay attention to the push moving forward.
Yeah, the biggest thing to say about the house show results and who's getting pushed and who isn't, just look who from the JWA was in the World League. Rikidozan, Toyonobori, Kokichi Endo. It's the same guys we've been talking about for 3 or 4 years now. The top of the card is the same 4 guys that it's been forever, not counting Azuma Fuji, who just recently retired.
Right.
So when you have 10 matches and the top 8 matches or the first 7 matches are including the same undercard dudes every time, you're just mixing and matching them. It's the last 3 matches that have all the same guys in it, and they're always at the top of the card. So nothing's really changed in regards to that, other than trying to push Toyonobori to the very top, but his position really hasn't changed that much. So that tour ends, the World League ends, another huge success for Toyonobori, for Rikidozan. He's super excited, and we roll right into another international competition. I suspect that somebody just called it that, because I can't imagine you're going to do international competition for the second tour of the year, because you already did the same thing, international competition.
They're going to keep doing it for the rest of the year. Every tour that happens is international competition, which really differentiates it from the World League at the very least, I suppose.
It differentiates it a little bit, but they're keeping most of the guys that were in the World League for a few more days, from the May 14th to 16th. So we get 2 or 3 shows with most of the guys. 6 of the guys only stick around for a few shows of the next tour. And the remainder of the folks in the World League stay for the second tour. Now I get it.
33 cards coming from the middle of May. Basically, the World League ends, and the very next day, May the 14th, the International Competitions Tour begins, and that's going to go through about the middle of July. 33 cards over the next couple months here. Lots of action, obviously. And as you said, almost everyone, basically everyone that was just part of that last tour, as far as the Gaijin go, are on this tour as well. Now, some, as you say, will leave after a few nights, but others will stick around. Sonny Myers, Dan Miller, a couple of those names that are going to stick around for the entire tour. But that's where we are. We're going through the summer of 60 right now.
Yeah, and much to your chagrin, Hombre Montana is one of those guys that only sticks around for the first 2 shows of the tour, the 14th and the 16th of May tours.
Couldn't afford them, man.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So we're still looking at sellouts, even for the first shows after the World League. We're getting more 11,000, 12,000 in Tokyo Metropolitan Gym. Lots of sellouts. They're going to other arenas that might not be as big, but we're still getting sellouts. Civic halls are selling out. They wrestled in a vacant lot in front of a train station on the 29th of May.
A lot of wrestling companies do that now.
Yeah, it's cheap booking. You don't have to pay for a building. Just say, can we use your parking lot? I have lots of handheld footage. I think a lot of All Japan women handheld footage from the early 80s was a lot of outdoor parking lot shows.
Wow, talk about getting your money's worth if you come to those shows.
Exactly. Yeah. Osaka Prefectural Gym, they're still doing the big shows, but they're adding in some of these smaller shows, but I'm seeing a lot of sellouts. And this is only making Rikidozan more money. I would like to think at some point he's paying back some of the young boys that have been working for nothing for all this time.
Yeah, as I'm scrolling, and I don't know where you are in regards to the results, so I don't want to get too far ahead of you, but I'm down here looking just as we go through the tour, which ends, I think, July 9th. I'm at July 3rd right now, and I'm looking at Chiba at the Municipal Stadium, drawing another 20,000 there at the stadium for 6-man tag team action. So they're doing a hell of a job, man, just drawing. It's amazing. You know, the numbers have definitely changed, and they were doing pretty damn good last year. But this year, it's just, no wonder, you know, the business is picking up.
Believe it or not, they drew 5,000 people to a vacant lot next to the city hall in Hokkaido.
Yeah,
so this qualifies as a hot promotion at this point.
I'd say so.
And he still only has TV every 2 weeks. So you're looking at 26 TV shows a year, which are all paying him money to have the show. But he's like, I'm not relying on just that. This is very different than the first tour of the year, where he only had a show when there was a TV taping. Now he's going all over the place, and they are selling out, sellout after sellout after sellout.
And listen to this
ridiculous.
One too, Dan. Yeah, absolutely. It's insane. And listen to this one, guys. July 8th, they were planning to do a show in Tokyo at the Den-In Coliseum, which holds 20,000. Unfortunately, it was postponed due to rain. Postponed to the following day, July the 9th, still in the Den-In Coliseum. What do they draw, Dan?
20,000 people sell out. It's also a TV taping. And you may have seen footage from the Den-In Coliseum before. There's a famous New Japan house show from September 23rd, 1981, with the famous Andre versus Stan Hansen match. I want to say there's at least one or two big-time All Japan shows for the Maniac fans. They might remember them being in Den-In Coliseum because it looks so different on TV being outside. Sometimes, though, they have posts outside the ring, but I think they're more for lights than they are for any kind of cover from the weather.
Even on the delay, the postponement of the rain, and you have to imagine the rain's, even if it subsided by the following day. I've seen that issue covering 86 UWF. They ran a show that was, in the fairgrounds and whatnot, and, the fans still packed. They packed about more than half the building the following day when it was postponed, but obviously there were issues, and the land around there was very much soaked. You don't cancel a show due to a slight drizzle, guys. So if it was a rain, you better believe it was a torrential downpour of sorts, I would have to imagine, for them to have to postpone it completely to the following day, and still to draw 20,000 people on a day it wasn't even planned to take place. Just amazing.
Yep. And all of this for the main event of Rikidozan versus Sonny Myers for the International Heavyweight title. The semi-main, Toyonobori and Kokichi Endo and Michiyuki Yoshimura versus Dan Miller, Frank Valois, and the Great Togo, and Yoshinosato versus new kid Mammoth Suzuki. But again, this is just to show you that this 20,000 person sellout in Den-In Coliseum, it's the same guys on top every time. And you know what? The fans love it.
They love their superstars.
Yep, this is an established brand now. Rikidozan is in his element, and the more shows he can have, the better off he'll be. Now, there is one thing that shows up here, or one person that shows up, which is a little... I don't get it. I'm not sure what the real reason is. All we have to go by is the report at the time. Even though he wasn't booked for the tour, Ricky Waldo shows up in Japan. And his story was that he had been wrestling in Australia and Singapore, but the promoter in Singapore didn't pay him enough. So he came to Tokyo hoping to find work. And some reporters called him a vagabond. But his story won Rikidozan's sympathy, and he added Ricky to the roster, and he appeared on TV matches in August. I have no idea if this is true, or if he signs Ricky Waldo and says, well, what's your angle? He goes, I don't have an angle.
What's your story, man?
I'm just a guy. And it's like, well, that ain't going to work. How about we do this? We'll claim that you got screwed over by a promoter in Singapore, and you're down on your luck, and I'm here to help you, and I'm going to give you a shot. So it sounds good to me. I'm just trying to kind of read between the lines here, which you often have to do with history books. And the history of Japanese wrestling is no different. So we get to, luckily, they changed the name of this tour. Oh, wait, they didn't. International Competitions of the Summer. I don't really count that as a meaningful change, transformational at all. But this one, it runs only, am I getting it 4 cards?
Yes, 4 cards. You're correct. 4 cards, you're right.
So we're back to the model of I'm only going to run a show when there's a TV crew here and the network is paying me money to provide their network with a show they can sell advertising for.
Yeah, the 4 cards over 2 months. Yeah, TV programs. There you go.
So it's almost like you're taking the summer off. Who does that? Did St. Louis? St. Louis did that, right? They ran by seasons. I know summer was a downtime. No, I know summer was a downtime for a lot of the territories. And, some people like Ron Fuller would sell their territory to Marks every summer and say, hey, look at all my great business I've been doing here. Buy my pro, they sell it for astronomical amounts of money. And then, the sucker has a terrible summer. He's not making any money. And then Ron Fuller knew to come back in September and go, here, I'll buy it back for pennies on the dollar. But that's neither here nor there. And it's definitely there. That's pro wrestling. That's how pro wrestling works. You got to love it. There's always somebody who's just greedy enough and ignorant enough to think that they can jump in and be one of those pro wrestling promoters. And the current promoters are more than happy to take their money and then take their promotion back.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the names on this this quote unquote tour here of the 4 shows, or maybe that's for that's for September. We got some other shows coming up September, and I think it's back to the old guard of the names I'm not familiar with, like a Larry Jackson. The Midgets are going to come to town. A guy by the name of Moon Mitchell. He seems pretty cool, right? Bobo Khan, and of course Ricky Waldo headlining the guest foreigners. Perseverance.
Yes, Ricky Waldo is the one that sticks around for all 4 shows. None of the others stay. Larry Jackson does 2 shows in the tour. And everybody else, they only stick around for 1 show. So let's just take a quick peek at what we're looking at here. You'd be surprised to know that they're all televised. Who's actually getting on TV for these? Yoshimura and Yoshinosato against Waldo and Jackson for one main event. We go to the next one. Oh, we do have something of note here. So August 19th, you do have a match for the junior heavyweight title with Michiaki Yoshimura versus Yoshinosato. And it goes to a 61-minute time limit. But the thing of note here is that after this match, Michiaki Yoshimura would move up to the heavyweight class. And because of that, Yoshinosato was awarded the junior heavyweight title by virtue of the pin. So if the pin establishes you as good as the champion, and the champion saying, I'm abdicating because I'm moving up a weight class, the logical choice is the guy that just took him to a draw.
Right.
So it's kind of a win-win. You're putting over the guy. Yoshimura certainly doesn't lose. He goes to a draw. He says, I want to try against the heavyweights. And now you're putting Yoshinosato over by giving him the belt. This actually makes sense. This is good booking here. When you're elevating a guy, you're also elevating the guy he just wrestled. And you're giving him a title at the same time. So Yoshinosato's got to be very happy with his position here. And in the semi-main, Toyonobori and Kokichi Endo against Ricky Waldo and Bobo Khan. That's like the last time you're going to see any of those guys. We see the midgets are on. I didn't think he wanted midgets. I didn't think Rikidozan wanted midgets on his shows. Why am I thinking that? I might be thinking of somebody else. Oh, you know what it is? I think it was Luthez said that he would not perform on a show that had women or midgets on it.
I'd never heard that, but I mean, I could see that. I know Sam Muchnick was pretty big on sticking straight to the guys.
Yeah, his style of wrestling was very straight-laced. I mean, people still dressed up in like suit and tie. It was like dinner theater to them by going to St. Louis and watching the shows there. So Luthez just, I don't think he wanted to be involved with that degree of theatrics, almost like sideshow stuff, carnival stuff. I don't know.
One thing that I have noticed, and I think we discussed that last episode as well, too, is that even when Rikidozan doesn't want to bring in actual talent, big names from the other countries here, when he does these other tours where he's just trying to save some money, save some cash. Well, this time around, he's bringing the midgets in, but he grabs these guys from the GHQ, the general headquarters or whatnot, in regards to just, again, I think we go back to Larry Jackson and all those guys.
Yeah, we're going to be referring to the GHQ, and we have before. For those of you who forgot everything you learned in history, after World War II, we stuck around in Japan for a long time. We basically handled their military and just to keep an eye on them, and we had a general headquarters in Japan.
There you go.
And there's your GHQ. So you had a bunch of military guys sitting around hanging out, and some of them, a lot of them, it seems, would get involved with these wrestling shows.
Right.
And that's why you end up with these crazy names like Bobo Khan. And unfortunately, Bobo Khan wasn't quite what the audience was expecting. And it says here in some of the notes we have that the audience knew instantly that the skinny masked Bobo Khan was not a real professional wrestler, and they laughed hysterically as he walked to the ring. Khan was unmasked after being KO'd legitimately in the first couple minutes of the match.
Can you see him? I can see it right now. Like Rikidozan sees this not getting over, so he just knocks the dude out legit. Like, oh, this is done.
I love it. I love it. His real name was not revealed. To protect
Bobo
the
Khan.
Innocence. They did have the Little People wrestling in Nagoya on August 6th. They had made a tour in 18 cities just as the Midget guys and running their own set of shows, and they stuck around.
No, I was going to say they did that often as far as like international tours. The Midgets would go perform before the Queen of England and things of that nature. So they would do that quite often, go around to continent, country to country, and perform like that for quite long periods of time.
Yeah, it's a traveling show, and it makes sense. This is the first time that I remember a JWA show having the little guys on it, though.
Right, absolutely.
So we'll see if Rikidozan decides to continue this. Rikidozan would, after this tour, all 4 shows of it, he went to visit Italy to cheer on the Japanese athletes who were in the Olympic Games in 1960 in Rome. We do have Rikidozan refereeing a match on the 19th of August, their TV show. Oh, that had the match. I'm sorry. This is what we just talked about for all that time, August 19th. I finally got to the actual TV, and the main event was Michiaki Yoshimura versus Yoshinosato.
Right.
So
yeah.
Highly profiled on TV. You're elevating one guy to the next division. You're promoting the other guy to become a title holder. This is just makes total sense in the booking point of view.
Yeah, you can't. You don't want to job Yoshimura here because he's moving up to a heavyweight, so you don't want to have him do a job to a junior weight. But at the same time, Yoshinosato, you can't put him down because he's about to get the belt. And Yoshinosato had been the light heavyweight before this, so now he's moved up a weight class by this point as well, the junior heavyweight now.
And there is an advantage bringing up Michiaki Yoshimura, who is a smaller guy, up to the heavyweight class, is that you can almost turn him into a Rocky figure, where in the beginning, you can job him because he doesn't know what it's like to wrestle the heavyweights yet. So you can kind of write out this plot line for him where he gets beat in the beginning and he starts to figure it out and work his way up to gaining relevance in the new heavyweight division. You don't want to have a junior heavyweight star just step into the heavyweight ranks and be awesome right off the bat, because then it kind of makes the heavyweights not look as good as they should be. And this is evidenced by the very first show that Yoshimura has as a heavyweight. He loses to Ricky Waldo in 18 minutes, though. 18. It's not like he's getting unmasked, knocked unconscious within the first couple minutes.
Poor Bobo.
Like poor Bobo. But he takes a loss, and it's a loss as the main event of the TV show.
Right.
So they're doing this on purpose for a reason, which is to lay the groundwork of this is Yoshimura starting to learn what it takes to be a heavyweight.
And I'm buying this story about Ricky Waldo just arriving randomly and asking for a job less and less as he's focal point of TV here, the main event, and going over on an established talent that's part of the local roster in Yoshimura. So I'm sure that's a big setup to fall. But Ricky Waldo, for those who don't know, I know he worked some in Stampede. He's a well put together guy. I'm sure there's pictures of him out there for you guys to go check out. So it wasn't like he was one of these GHQ guys that just popped up and said, "Hey, I need some work." I mean, he knew how to work. He knew his way around the ring.
Absolutely. And obviously it looks like that was the angle. How do we introduce Ricky Waldo? I don't know. How about this? Well, better than nothing. He's a vagabond.
And other promoters don't pay as well. That's another one too.
Yeah, that's true. The stupid guys from Singapore are not paying. So the only other show after Ricky Waldo defeating Michiaki Yoshimura is the September 30th show. This is an important show for a number of reasons. Let's just do traditional booking right off the bat. The main event on TV of this one is Rikidozan against Ricky Waldo. Well, of course, Rikidozan wins. But what have we now said? Ricky Waldo was good enough to beat Yoshimura in 18 minutes, which is not a short amount of time. But now that guy that beat Yoshimura has to go up against Rikidozan. So Ricky Waldo, who was able to beat Yoshimura, actually goes to a draw against Rikidozan. So you're putting over Ricky Waldo, the vagabond who just happened to show up. And that makes Yoshimura's performance in lasting 18 minutes against this guy look even better. So somebody's paying attention with the way they're handling Yoshimura after elevating to the heavyweight ranks.
Right. And again, I go back to, we talked about, and it's kind of overlooked in the notes in regards to, where we got these from. But so Yoshimura goes up from junior heavyweight to heavyweight. He becomes the new heavyweight of the division there, but he's not champion anymore. He's no longer the junior champion. Yoshinosato is. But in order for Yoshinosato to become the junior heavyweight champion, he had to vacate the light heavyweight championship. And so on September 30th, they create a new light heavyweight tournament to crown a new champion.
Oh, good point. I didn't even think of that, but here it is on another event on September 30th, 1960, which turns out to be a pivotal show in the history of everything.
Right.
When you think about
so much going on.
Now, I don't know. Do they actually appoint the light heavyweight champion here?
Oh, good call. I don't
later?
know if we crown a champion here. Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
Well,
but
that wasn't really the big part of this show, so I apologize for taking us away from where you were going, Dan.
No, it made sense, though, because once somebody elevates and you have to fill in the blank, it's going to be like dominoes. There's a series of things that have to happen. So the light heavyweight championship that got vacated has to also be filled. Now, one other thing I noticed here about Yoshimura, how we're treating him, he was in the semi-main for this show with Toyonobori against Larry Jackson and Moon Mitchell, and Yoshimura gets the pin against Larry Jackson.
Right.
So this new guy that's new to the heavyweight division loses to Ricky Waldo, who Rikidozan can only go to a draw with, and then in the next show, he actually pins a guy in the heavyweight division. So this is a pretty smooth transition for Michiaki Yoshimura, and this is a very strong push, in my opinion.
So we've got title tournament matches. We've got a big main event there. Ricky Waldo's been built up pretty good, pretty quickly here. He worked Rikidozan. You just talked about that tag team match with a pretty damn cool team of Yoshimura and Toyonobori teaming up and scoring a win. But I think you're getting to something even bigger in the grand scheme of things.
That's correct. It's not even the semi-main, but they're matches that are what I look to be the 7th and 8th matches of this show. So they're pretty high up on the card.
Yeah.
Are the debuts of Kanji Inoki and Shohei Baba. Kanji Inoki would lose to Kentaro Oki in 7 minutes, 6 seconds with an arm lock. Baba would actually defeat Yonataro Tanaka in 5 minutes, 15 seconds with a leg spread. And this is putting them up. Welcome to the world of wrestling. Their debuts are right at the top of the card. The only people ahead of them are already established headliners like Yoshinosato, Nagasawa. We already know those guys, and we already talked about the semi-main and the main. So this is a super strong push for two new guys that are Rikidozan's understudies, and he is doing them right, in my opinion, by having them the 7th and 8th matches on this card in front of 6,000 people.
So, let's address the elephant in the room. Kentaro Oki over Antonio Inoki, but the Giant Baba scoring a win over Tanaka. So Inoki jobs and Baba gets a win in their debut matches. You think that's why Inoki always had that axe to grind?
I think he had an axe to grind for a couple of reasons. The one thing that he relied on, in my opinion, is that he was a legitimate athlete, a legitimate fighter.
Right.
Because he was a legit fighter. He could fight. He was an athlete that's different than a baseball player.
Well, let's also look at their opponents as well in this instance.
That's true. I think Oki is farther up the ladder than Yonataro Tanaka too.
Right.
So I wouldn't feel too bad. But I like baseball. You can be not the best athlete and still be a good baseball player. I find a lot of things about baseball are more skill-based than how much can you bench, how fast is your 40-yard dash, etc.
Right.
But when you're a track and field champion in shot put and javelin throw
right.
and running or jumping, that's like a legit athlete. And I think that Kanji Inoki thought at the time, I'm the real athlete, and not to use the word, freak, but somebody who's 6'10" and 360 pounds. Of course, you're going to make money. You're going to try to feature that guy because people will just come to see him, much less see him wrestle.
Right.
And maybe Inoki said, I offer, I'm real wrestling and he's more of the sideshow. What he would find out is that Shohei Baba took his wrestling very seriously. And a guy of his size who did the things he did in the ring, he wrestled a style that was not the traditional giant style. And that was refreshing to see, in my opinion. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about the history of Giant Baba going forward and how he performs in the ring. Luckily, we have tons of footage of Baba.
Tons.
So when we start doing the watch-alongs and the video casts, we're all going to get to see that.
Yeah.
So this September 30th show is such a huge show for the history of Japanese professional wrestling. You see the debut of Inoki. You see the debut of Baba. You see Rikidozan going to a draw against Ricky Waldo, which by definition puts over Michiaki Yoshimura, the newly crowned heavyweight wrestler. And we're starting to see the repercussions of him jumping with the light heavyweight championship tournament happening.
Right.
And we see Yoshiwara moving into the finals. And hopefully we'll find out who wins who's on the other side, so we can find out who the champion is soon enough. Let's see what else we have for notes here about this show. What more can we say about this show? I feel like we've talked forever about just one show. That's cool. Larry Jackson and Moon Mitchell were both part-time wrestlers and with the general headquarters, GHQ. Rikidozan stood on Baba's side to groom him to take over his position. That certainly appears to still be the same based on the results of the show. Of course, one is a giant. And when you're in a wrestling promotion, you want to see these physical people that don't look like your average everyday person. Mm-hmm. And Giant Baba definitely satisfied that.
Sure, absolutely.
So we made it to the end of September. It's hard to believe, but I feel like they've been wrestling for 5 months straight with the World League going up and the next tour starting the very next day.
Certainly a lot more action going on lately. Remember, there were months of darkness in prior years in the 1950s, but yeah, I'd say that we're full go now.
I wonder if it's because he's got enough money where he doesn't have to run and hide from
can actually pay the talent. Yeah.
And he doesn't have to go overseas to generate money because he can't generate money in Japan. It looks like he's generating plenty of money in Japan now. Nice. So we have yet another tour. And again, he still wants to save the money. So this one's called Pro Wrestling International Competition for the 100th anniversary of the Japan-US Amity.
Explain that to me, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't that long ago, back in the 40s, that we were having issues with Japan. For those of you who don't know what amity means, it's kind of like a friendship or a trust or whatever you want to call it. So 100th anniversary, I guess we're rewriting history here. I don't know.
I'm sure. Maybe I didn't pay enough attention in history class. But then again, I didn't even know that they had the arrangement to emigrate over to Brazil, and it started way before the World War started. Yeah. It had been going on for like 50 years, almost from the beginning of the century. Yeah. So what the heck do I know? What I do know is that this tour, the first tour, runs from October 14th to November 19th. Yeah. 26 cards. Wow. And they would shoehorn in another pro wrestling international competition that would run from November 25th to December 9th.
An extra 3 cards.
Extra 3 cards, but the cool part about this is that we've got some guys coming in that are a little more exciting than your average everyday gaijin, including one Curtis King Iaukea. And in 1960, I don't think he might have been king by then.
Maybe he was Prince Iaukea back then.
Hey, that guy was a good wrestler. Do you remember him from WCW?
I remember when he was the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea. That's how deep my shit goes.
Hey. Tex McKenzie too. So these guys are big time actual superstars in the United States. These are people that the wrestling fans are actually going to know. And then we still have Ricky Waldo, Larry Jackson, and Sardara Singh.
And I'm wondering if that's Dara Singh, and it's just lost in the translation here for this tour. but I see it over and over, Sardara Singh, so it could be somebody different. I haven't done enough digging to confirm or deny that, but yeah, Ricky Waldo stays aboard for the next tour. I'm sure Rikidozan finally going to get that win here. We'll have to wait and see, but Larry Jackson also heading back from the GHQ. So, but there it is, the big two names here, obviously Tex McKenzie and the future king, but at this point, Prince Iaukea.
Yeah, and it's weird to me because I'm thinking of Curtis Iaukea as he could talk people into the building, but I'm not sure Japanese pro wrestling was set up that way with the long form, with the interview that drew you to the arena. It's a different business model. Mm-hmm. So one of Curtis Iaukei's biggest strengths, he won't really get to use much over in Japan. But Tex McKenzie, we all know Tex McKenzie. We're familiar with Tex McKenzie, but the Japanese don't really know what the heck Tex meant. It's short for Texas. It's to imply you're from Texas. So they call you Tex, but the Japanese had no idea what the heck was going on with that name. They just thought it was a weird name.
Yeah, so they renamed him Texas McKenzie for the entire tour so as not to confuse the Japanese people. Yeah. Texas McKenzie.
Aren't we accommodating? So this tour would continue to have sellouts, 8,000 people for this show. Don't have a ton of results. More sellouts, 12,000 for an elementary school in Ibaraki. 5,000 seat sellout in a prefectural sports center in Tochigi. Still drawing good money for all these.
October 19th, we find our light heavyweight championship tournament final as well. So we do have a new light heavyweight champion before the end of the year.
There it is. And we had already given you one of them, Asawa Yoshiwara. The other finalist was Kiyotaka Otsubo. And it looks like Yoshiwara gets the win in the third fall. He gets the first and third falls. Otsubo gets the second. So your new light heavyweight champion is Isawa Yoshiwara. And now you got Curtis Iaukea against Yoshimura. So Yoshimura getting more experience as a heavyweight. He loses the match, but that's what he's supposed to do. He's new. But in tag matches, he can get a pin. So it looks like they're developing him properly. They're not rushing him up. Although I wonder if part of this might be because Toyonobori is a little bit more of a headache to Rikidozan than he originally thought. So he's laying the groundwork for Michiaki Yoshimura, who by all accounts is an excellent worker as far as a pro wrestler. And maybe Rikidozan is hedging his bets a little bit by moving Yoshimura along. I'm just speculating here.
Right.
But the way he's being treated and handled seems like it's very carefully done. And if I wasn't in full trust of Toyonobori and couldn't rely on him, then I would want to make sure whoever I'm bringing in next, I take more of a hand in developing. And that's what it looks like to me with Yoshimura.
As I'm looking through the results here, and I completely agree with what you're seeing here, but the main events almost every night are tag team or six-man tags, and the top three gaijin in every one of those, it's either Iaukea and Tex teaming up or Iaukea, Tex, and Ricky Waldo in six-man tags. But as I scroll along to October 21st at the elementary school, in front of nearly 15,000 people, by the way, guys. Wow, this is a big-ass elementary school, Dan.
Crazy.
So the main event's Toyonobori and Rikidozan over King Curtis and Ricky Waldo, but the semi-main is Yoshimura defeating Big Texas McKenzie.
Yeah, his first singles win against a heavyweight, and it took, 9 shows for him to do it?
Didn't take long.
No, it didn't. But in this way, you move from tour to tour. I still think it's being carefully handled, and they must be coming up, close to the end of the tour that they're going to give give Yoshimura a win over Tex. He may get it back before the end of the tour, but this is an important date for Yoshimura's development. And again, it shows that there is a careful managing of Yoshimura's heavyweight career as so far as it's gone.
I don't know if you have this in front of you right now. I have a little blurb here. I got it from your notes in regards to what Rikidozan's initial plan was for himself on this tour in regards to the story he was going to tell in the ring and who he had planned to work against, but the deal fell through.
Yeah, Rikidozan did have plans originally to develop a huge feud between himself and Tex McKenzie, but they didn't get along, which actually sounds like it means Tex complained about taking Rikidozan's chops to the chest, and said, it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to kill me. Wrestling doesn't have to be this way.
So Rikidozan said,
yeah, I'll give the spot to Prince Iaukea. See, he was the prince at the time. I was right.
I knew it.
He would eventually become King Curtis, but at this time he was just a prince.
Just a
so
young
I said,
pup.
all right, screw you. If you don't want to play along with my rough style, I'll just use Iaukea instead. But there were other reports of wrestlers who complained about Rikidozan's stiffness, but everyone put up with it because they were paid far more than they would have in America. So it was kind of like, this is the price you pay. You're going to get beat up by him, but you're also going to make money off of him. You have to make him look like a superstar because he is a superstar. That's what you're here for. And along those lines, there was a newspaper article that reported Rikidozan had said that to the news that he paid the U.S. grapplers 3 times as much as they made in their country, which might be an exaggeration, but it's likely that he paid them at least twice as much.
Right.
So this is Rikidozan saying, listen, I pay these guys good money for me to beat the crap out of them.
Those Japanese paydays, man, those things were real, man.
And they never went away.
No.
We will get to it, but there is stuff talking about all the way up to 1985 when the Road Warriors came in that caused a lot of ripples in the industry. And they were talking about $15,000 a week in 1985, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, do the inflation calculator, guys. Holy shit.
Yeah, if you listen to any of Jim Cornette's podcasts and they talk about money from the 80s, from the mid-80s, $15,000 a week is ridiculous compared to what the Crockett guys were doing.
Right.
So we make it to the end of October, more sellouts, 8,000, 7,000, 10,000 in a pool, which so many pool shows now. Now we go to a story out of Tokyo. The first establishments in the Far East with commercial bowling installations will be opened by Rikidozan, the 270-pound heavyweight wrestling champion in Japan. If that's true, because he wasn't the tallest guy, that guy was a tank as well.
He looked like one in the pictures I've seen anyway. I mean, watching him in the ring, I don't know if I would, estimate 270. It could, I don't know. It could be though, because I've seen him in there and he's a pretty solid dude. That's for sure.
Super stocky. A 48-lane bowling alley will be open in Tokyo early next year.
Talk about aspirations.
Yeah, and 2 other establishments, each with 24 lanes, will be open later. One in Osaka and the second in Tokyo. And this came from October 26, 1960, syndicated news. And it says at the time, Rikidozan, 36 years old, has about $6 million invested in this business, which is strange considering a year before that, his own guys were begging for food.
Right. He was hiding out in Hawaii, writing letters, likely with somebody else's postage stamps.
Correct. Rikidozan seems to have no trouble generating money. It's where he spends it and how he spends it to be the big problem.
There you go.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, if you know what's good for you.
Let's see. We make it to October 27th. Another 8,000 people in a gym. 11,000, 11,000, 5,000. This tour just keeps going, and it's just, you can't find. Here's 3,300 people at Kyoto, a music hall, and it's a sellout. So when they book the arena, you book it knowing how much it's going to cost to even get the building, and you project and say, okay, I need this many tickets to make money. You're not going to book a place that you can't make a profit at. So even though there's only 3,300 people at the Maruyama Music Hall in Kyoto, it's a sellout. So that means you're guaranteed to make money even from a show that only draws 3,300.
Right. So you know what you're walking into in regards to how many seats are there. But the point is, it was a sellout. That's as many people as you could hold. So you're still doing a phenomenal job.
It's best case scenario for whatever your business model was or your business projections for that particular venue. Mm-hmm. You exceeded them because you sold every ticket you could sell. And that continues all the way up. And now we're into November, still selling out 10,000 people at the Osaka Prefectural Gym. And they run multiple shows there, 10,000, back to Tokyo Metropolitan, which can be anywhere from 12 to 17,000 people. He's drawing 10,000. And we're making all the way to the end of November. And this is the match at the Pro Rest Center. Is that Rikidozan Center, like the Rikidozan
His
Hall?
dojo type deal? I think so.
So all these dates are in my head. I don't even know when anything happens anymore.
I should mention,
I feel like I'm trapped in time.
I don't want to overlook this, and I can't say it happened every night. But as we were scrolling, especially through November, I was just looking at where Inoki and Baba were on the card, and it's Inoki jobbing every night I looked at, and Baba going over every night I looked at. So kind of interesting.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's true.
Hey, I see talent in you, and he brings Inoki and he gets him to pack his bags and leave Brazil and come back to Japan thinking that this is the guy. But when he gets back to Japan, he sees Baba. He looks up and says, oh my God, what do I have here? And now Baba's getting the bigger push than Inoki initially out of the gate. So that had to suck a little bit. I could see why Inoki wasn't so happy. Yeah.
I do see him getting beat in not quite the semi-main, but right below Baba by Nagasawa. So he is wrestling some of the bigger guys. Yes. And when he's on the second or third match on the show, that's when Inoki gets his wins. Like against Mr. Chin is a consistent win for him. And then other guys he loses to. He does lose to Isawa Yoshiwara, who was in the finals of the light heavyweight championship just a month prior. He's getting experience and he's getting matches against real guys. He's not buried in the 4 or 5 matches.
I'm a firm believer in the whole paying your dues thing, especially since you've never been a professional. I mean, he came to the country in April and he's out here, by the fall, he's out here just thrown out to wrestle. Here you go, kid, learn it. And I'm not saying he should be going over Inoki, but I just find it amusing but how do you job a 6'10" guy? Right? I mean, every night. Yeah. You just can't do it. You kill him.
Sadly, Rikidozan has experience with jobbing a 6'10" guy, and they ended up making not a penny off him.
Good call, yeah.
You don't get a second chance very often, but I'm going to give Rikidozan credit here. When Baba showed up, he probably thought to himself, I'm not going to let this one slip away. There's no reason for me not to promote a 6'10" guy.
Yeah, and for those who've only seen Baba from the 80s and then even the 90s, I mean, you got to do yourselves a favor, and we're going to be covering that extensively with video casts. But go back and watch. I was just watching the Baba Gorilla Monsoon match and watching both of them in that era. Amazing what both guys could do. Gorilla doing the roll throughs and things to counter the wrist locks, but Baba throwing some awesome drop kicks and everything. So, I mean, just do yourselves a even Andre, you got to go back and watch some of their earlier stuff before, they became, I don't want to call it crippled, but I guess you could. It's really, really good stuff. I enjoy the early Baba stuff.
Yeah, he is so much more than he would have to. I've seen guys his size that we booked as the giant guy. And the giant guy basically does the giant stuff, and he has a giant guy match. And it can be very formulaic. And Baba does almost none of that. He has a couple of what I would consider giant spots, and everything else is him being a wrestler, which looks so weird see a guy his size doing arm locks and key locks and traditional pro wrestling moves. So he was really a treat to watch. Same thing with Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant was frightening. There's footage from him from the IWE Kokusai from 1972.
Oh my God, yeah. Yep.
And the things he can do, as at that point he probably was in his early 20s, is unbelievable. You will not believe it, but you will get a chance to see it at a future video cast coming your way.
Yeah, jumping tombstones. I don't know if I would take that from Andre, no matter how healthy he was. And then just taking bumps. Kurt Hennig-esque like bumps. 7 foot tall. Andre the Giant, unbelievable.
Yeah, we have so many things to show you as time moves on. And we'll move on with the last few shows of this tour because we're going to move into the 3 shows that lead into December. More sellouts. there's a live TV on the 9th to pretty much end the season for 1960 in the Shinagawa Public Hall. And that has only 2 matches that are on the broadcast. And here's something that's important. It's December 9th, 1960. So we're about 2 months into the debut of Baba and Inoki. And Baba is getting to wrestle Yoshinosato as the first match on the TV episode.
Yeah, Baba's making TV.
He's making TV. It's an interesting match. I would have liked to have seen it just for the visual of it, but Yoshinosato does defeat Baba in 1 minute 41 seconds with a count out of ring. So I'm trying to think into the head of Rikidozan here. Anyone against Baba physically will look very strange because most of the wrestlers are smaller and he is an absolute giant. So how do you have like a regular match with him and have the fans buy it? They're looking at a giant. What are you supposed to do with him? Well, maybe you have more of a non-match by having a count out of ring, more of a spectacle kind of match, which makes sense for a physical spectacle of Shohei Baba. So the debut of Baba on TV isn't even in the framework of a regular match. It's more of like, holy smokes, what did I just see? It looks like Yoshinosato had fought him on a prior television episode. And now I feel awful about it because I scrolled too far down. And I just want to make sure that
December 9th, I see them on TV.
Yeah, I'm saying Baba was on the 2 prior TV episodes.
Okay.
And
so they were establishing him on television, obviously.
Yeah. And his first match on TV was still against Yoshinosato. And that the result of that was Yoshinosato defeated him 2 straight falls, 8 minutes, 9 seconds inside cradle, and then another count out of ring in 5 minutes. So the first match of Baba on TV, he loses to Yoshinosato. And then the third match, which is the one we referenced in December 9th, was more of the spectacle, finish or non-match match, which was only less than 2 minutes. He did fight Nagasawa, another guy that was getting matches against Inoki. So maybe Rikidozan trusted Nagasawa enough by this time as one of the top 4 or 5 guys in his promotion that work with these guys, work with Baba, work with Inoki, and, kind of show him the ropes. And that appears that Nagasawa might have been in that role where he got to wrestle both of these guys. And Baba would actually defeat Nagasawa in 2 straight falls. So Baba's actually got a win on TV on November 25th. So I want to retract everything I said about December 9th being his debut on TV. He actually debuted 2 episodes prior, and he already has a win on TV. So now at this point, if I'm Inoki, maybe I'm getting a little, hey, what's going on here? What about me? What about Raven? And I'm trying to find there's not.
Quite the visual.
Someone should meme that.
Oh, yeah.
Meme Baba sitting in the corner with a leather jacket on saying, what about Raven?
Yeah. Tie a flannel around his waist.
Good times. I miss those times.
Great times.
Yeah, that's the end of 1960. Inoki doesn't make TV, not that as far as I can see. Baba gets 3 shots on TV, gets a win and 2 losses.
Schmoz. Yeah.
One was a total schmoz. and the other ones were, one was a legit win against Nagasawa, and the other was still a loss against Yoshinosato.
So very eventful year, to say the least. Inoki finds himself Inoki, and then Baba just a few weeks later. We get the 2nd annual World League. No Mr. Atomic this year. That's okay, though. We had Hombre Montana in his place, so all is forgiven. And a lot of people love Mr. Atomic from 1959. I hope they bring him back someday, but I'm just, I'm loving it, man. And again, I hope everybody enjoyed the format today, kind of moved away from just reading results and kind of breaking things down and seeing where everybody is in the pecking order, because I think, as you said, Dan, that pecking order outside of Baba and Inoki now has pretty much been established. We can kind of get an idea of where everybody's going to be as far as the push goes. So now it's more about the stories and everything going on behind the scenes and, well, really in the ring to a degree.
Yeah, it's less of a data dump now because we're just trying to cover the basics of what wrestling was becoming in Japan. And we're going for more of an observational, analytical tone, looking over the tour at the 30,000 foot view, saying, look who won here. look at this push, look at this guy, how he's being handled. So we're trying to kind of get into the brain of the booker and understand what his thought process was when he was throwing this tour together. I think we pretty quickly sniffed out the whole vagabond thing with Ricky Waldo. Didn't make sense because he was ended up in the main event of like every TV episode. So
I don't know who you are, but I'm gonna push you straight to the main event here in a couple of weeks. Hang around, buddy.
You better only do that once. If we see something in 1962 about another vagabond, I'm going to be very disappointed because I don't think you can do that twice.
There was this vagabond named Fritz von Erich, and it's
Vagabond Lou Thez. So we'll see what he tries to pull off in 1961. But I got to think Rikidozan's leaving 1960 on a high. He's got two highly regarded recruits. He's got motion in the top of the card, elevating one guy, taking care of Yoshimura very well. He's got a little bit of a problem with Toyonobori, but Toyonobori's still in all the main events. He's just requiring a little more babysitting and a little more handling than Rikidozan would probably prefer, but he's also doing all this outside business stuff. This guy is going in a million different directions all at once, and I guess this might be like the high point so far of JWA. With the amount of shows they've run, the size of the crowds, they've got bi-weekly TV, 26 TV shows a year. They're making plenty of money now. I'm curious to see what 1961 brings.
Yeah, we're very much further along than we were just a year or two prior. Like I said, where they would go dark for months at a time. Rikidozan would leave and hide and because he didn't have the money he needed to pay off, as you said, debt collectors, but also the talent. And now that's not an issue. He has enough money to put $6 million down in 1960. If you were to believe that, it's got to be like $60 million today. It's insane to know that, this is what's going on behind the scenes with his business ventures. But at the same time, looking at all the talent, everybody coming in, we have multiple tours the same year featuring 20-some to 30-some events. And they're all selling out, or at least doing very well from what we can see here in regards to the notes. So it's a very lucrative time to be Rikidozan, to be professional wrestling in Japan.
Absolutely. It's super exciting, and we know where it goes from here. We just planted the seeds from which the rest of pro wrestling history is going to grow, with Baba and Inoki and Rikidozan firmly establishing a positive business aspect and some money really flowing in now. The outside business stuff, I think, is more of, from a standpoint of, you probably found that out after the fact. And this is all information that a lot of the boys probably weren't aware of at the time when they were begging for money.
Right.
They probably didn't realize he was running around with all these side businesses. And there'll be a parallel to that. And I want to say about 23 years from now, we're going to see a parallel to this situation about outside business interests causing trouble in the main promotion. But we'll leave that for a later episode.
Sounds good. Great teaser. And usually I cheat. I always look ahead to know what's coming in the following year. But we've been so busy getting everything together for the upcoming Puro Wrestling Academy video cast that I really haven't had time to jump ahead, really. So when I say I don't know what's coming next, I truly don't. So it makes me even more eager and anticipating the next episode we do here. 1961.
1961 is the next year. We're going to keep charging ahead. We're going to watch the development of Baba and Inoki and see what the heck Rikidozan's got planned for us next year.
All right, Dan, we're going to get ready to wrap things up here. Just want to encourage everybody right now to head on over to Patreon, as limited spots are out there. You guys, there's not so many left open. I encourage everybody to go over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. Log in and sign up for that VIP super fan tier. Going to get you all of the upcoming Puro Academy video casts as we go back in time and really enjoy ourselves. And hopefully you enjoy, I know you will, a lot of great stuff. But we're not just going to be watching old-timey wrestling, Dan. We're going to really be breaking it down, not just what's going on in the ring, but the context of the matches in front of us.
Yeah, you really got to get in on the ground floor of this. Wait till you see how we handle watching Japanese pro wrestling matches. I think we've established that we know our stuff. And when you watch a Japanese professional wrestling match, especially if you're not even that familiar with it, you're going to see two guys in the ring, but you might not know much more than that. Two guys in black tights wrestling. We have a lot more information. We'll tell you why you should care and what to expect from these. I've been doing this kind of thing for over 20 years, and I'm confident that I can entertain. Ray and I are going to entertain and educate you when you watch these video casts. If there was any reason that you had been hesitating to get on the Patreon at the VIP level so you can watch these video casts, I am telling you, you do not want to miss this. This is going to be big. This is going to be big. I'm confident of it because I've done it before. Ray's done it before, and we know we're going to do it well, and it's going to be something you're not going to want to miss.
Limited spots available, guys, so sign up today. And that's going to wrap it up for this week. 1960 in the books. We always seem to make it work here within a 2-hour window, Dan. I love it. We don't really force it that way. It just works out that way. It bees that way sometimes, is what Harvey Whippleman used to say, or Downtown Bruno, if you will. But we're going to wrap things up here this week. Appreciate it again, Dan. Thank you so much for being here.
No, glad to have everybody. For all of you that stuck it out, thanks for sticking around, and wait till you see what's coming up next. But you will have to wait, because for now, class is dismissed.